Hello, YouTube world. We're here with the Yoga Lawyer show. Last week, our episode was called Anger and Violence. So we thought this week, let's focus more on love and kindness. So that's
we'd like to mention is not the opposite of anger and violence.
No, not really. And we were actually saying that. Yeah, love doesn't really have an opposite, does it? Like sometimes people will say hate is the opposite of love, but I don't really buy that. I don't believe that hate is the opposite of love, because to really truly hate something, you have to have some love. There has to be some passion in it, and that suggests love.
Mm-hmm. I can get behind that.
And we also talked about how maybe that same passion can fuel action, but it doesn't necessarily have to turn to anger or violence. So we've got to learn how to rein in our passion and use it for good.
That's interesting because, black and white are opposites, but
Yes.
white is the absence of color.
Yes, and black is
all of the colors.
Yeah, black is all. Is it that way? I thought it was the other way around. Black is the absence of color, but that white was actually all colors. It's counterintuitive. No, it doesn't make sense, but white is light.
I guess.
Like black is the absence of light, so there can be no color if there's not light.
Same concept
Maybe.
applies, though.
Yes, probably. Let's not get into that. We could go down a rabbit hole again like we like to do.
Start
talking about prismatic.
Talking about rainbows.
Yes, colors, the color spectrum.
It's really astronomical.
No, what was the point you were making, though?
Oh, that love would be everything, and the absence of love would be nothing.
Oh, that was deep. I like that. We need to lighten it up a little bit and talk. So, we were starting by talking about passion, and that can kind of lead us into, it's okay to be passionate about things and to advocate for causes that we feel passionate about, but trying to walk that line of devolving into hatred and anger.
Protest is the new brunch.
Yeah, protest is cool. We've actually had a note on that, of course, coming up later in March 24th, the March for Our Lives movement. We talked about violence, gun violence, and those type of things last week, and we'll probably be talking about that a little bit today. And then again, next week we're going to have a show dedicated to the Second Amendment. Talk about some of the legal stuff behind it, actually get into some of the law behind the Second Amendment, not just what we say about it. But that aside, the March for Our Lives can be a thing where we look at it from an angle of love and kindness, and it doesn't necessarily have to turn into this angry thing, which sometimes protesting can take that route.
I mean, you're protesting because you're passionate about something.
And it doesn't. We don't have to be angry at anybody in particular. Like the whole movement to have restrictions on guns doesn't have to be a movement where we're angry at people that have guns or angry at anybody, really. I mean, both sides can come together on this issue. This can be a moment for us to practice love and kindness toward our fellow humans, and at the same time be passionate about a cause and make change. We've got to figure out how to navigate this as humans. This is the issue.
Yeah.
I see that we're having a lot of, it's like we have political discussions and it turns into
And violence isn't necessary
anger.
for change.
No, not at all. In fact, it's not the best way to make change. The biggest movements of change, like you think about the Civil Rights Movement, it was founded on nonviolence. Violence as a tool to spark change begets more violence.
Yeah, because it just creates fear.
Fear is the path to the dark side.
Fear is so strong. But necessary. But not necessary. I think there's a certain level of fear that we all have to have, just as like a self-preservation.
Well, yeah, to get around. I mean, if you weren't afraid of the bear would eat you.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And the same can be said for pain. Like, there's a certain level of pain that you need to have to be able to feel not pain, if that makes sense.
Well, we talked about this a little before the video, that we're in a world of opposites, right? And this brings us back to what we were saying, that love makes love so interesting because it doesn't really have an opposite. But we are in a world of opposites. There's pleasure, pain, good, bad.
Love is such a human thing because humans are so complex that we, like, have you ever met your complete opposite?
A person that was completely opposite from me?
Yeah,
I don't know that I would know.
In every aspect.
How would you define that?
I don't know if you could.
Because they would still be a human, so they can't be completely opposite.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making.
Arms and legs and a face.
I feel
a heart.
I feel that humans are so complex that we don't have.
Oh, we don't have an opposite.
Yeah, we don't have that yin and yang where it's like a complete opposite. you're going to find something that is similar to you.
So true. And that brings us to kindness. We said love and kindness, like kindness toward our fellow humans, because innately we all do have similarities. I mean, we're not exactly like everybody else. We have uniqueness, but at our hearts we are really the same. I mean, we're all on the same planet, living at the same time, similar fears, desires. I mean,
we probably entered the world the same way. I mean, I don't know if
there's not a lot of different ways to come in.
Genetically created.
We're all made of the same stuff that the planets and stars are made of, the same elements.
Stardust.
It all exists in us. So you and I are made of the same thing. We're breathing in the same air. We're exchanging molecules as we sit here.
And while we don't agree on everything, there's not something that there is something that we will agree on. There's something...
Yeah, we can find common ground. And that's what we have to do in these debates, is find common ground. It's interesting because, we tend to put people into opposites when we have discussions on Facebook or even in these forums on YouTube. It's like you're either for us or against us. And you either hate guns and you want to ban all of them, or you love them and you want no restrictions. And we as people have to rise up and go, no, we can have common sense here. There's a middle ground.
That is my favorite thing. We watched a video that I actually posted on our Facebook page of a Kentucky representative, Chris Harris, giving a speech where he basically said that he was giving up his NRA rating, which what that is the NRA will rate politicians based on their stance on gun control. So if you have a very lax stance on gun control, you don't support it, you get a higher rating, so more towards the A scale. But if you have a stronger stance on gun control and you do support it, you get a lower rating towards the F scale. Well, he said that he was giving up his A rating.
For Lent, he said for Lent. It is Lent now, which was kind of a cute way to put it, because he quoted the Bible in his little speech. His speech was nice.
And he spoke about common sense gun control, which is basically like, no, we're not trying to take your gun. Nobody's trying to take your gun. But there should be some regulations. You can't just hand them out like candy.
No. I mean, from my perspective, and this isn't exactly what he was saying, but I think it should be at least as difficult to get a gun as it is to get a driver's license. I mean, a car is a machine that could cause harm, and so is a gun. It doesn't make any sense to me that you have to take a test to get a driver's license and pass a safety class, but you don't have to do that for a gun. But I don't think that people shouldn't have guns. I think if they want to have a gun and they're able to take the class, then
especially considering that you need a license to drive a car, to pilot a vehicle that was not created with the intention of doing any harm. It was created to get you from point A to point B.
But it can cause harm, but it's not, the intention of it isn't to cause harm, where a gun really is, that's the purpose of it, is to injure or maim or hurt.
Yeah, and not necessarily, like, guns weren't created to kill people, but they were created to harm or to protect, and that how they protect is through harm.
I mean, that's what they do. I mean, you're not shooting at someone because you want to give them kindness. You're shooting at them to harm them, maybe not to kill them, but there could be a noble reason for doing that. And there are noble reasons for doing that. And it is part of our history as Americans to have guns. We have the Second Amendment, which we'll talk about more in the next episode. But so it doesn't make sense to completely ban guns, but this is what the debate devolves into, and it turns into anger and hate, where if we could come at it from the angle of, wow, we're all fellow humans working together to try to find common sense solutions.
And why I'm so inspired by this March for Our Lives that's happening on March 24th is because I think that while protest is usually fueled by anger or passion, where somebody has done something that makes you want to speak out against something,
it's fueled by passion that can sometimes turn to anger,
right,
for sure.
Right, like what happened with the Women's March.
Yeah, some of that devolved into angry naysaying.
Some angry people. But I think that this March for Our Lives is kind of fueled by this love and pain, because they lost so many young people who didn't get a chance to see the world. Or maybe one of those people was going to be president and was going to change gun laws. I don't know, but I think the underlying feeling for the March of Our Lives, or for our lives, is this love that we have for people, and we want to protect them. And we think that the way that they have been protected, through allowing guns for self-defense without having
any
those
kind of limits,
checks, is not effective. And they're just trying to create a different...
Based on unity. I mean, and even if you look at their their page, it says this is not nonpartisan. It really shouldn't be a partisan issue.
It shouldn't.
And I hope that they can rise up and continue to keep it nonpartisan, because the parties are going to each try to claim them for their different ends. That's just the nature of politics. But it should be a nonpartisan issue. And if the people that are marching can continue to maintain that high road, that state of love and kindness toward our fellow humans while we engage in discourse and try to make change, then that's when real change happens, lasting change.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't come at you from like an angle of hate or feel like you're being...
And it shouldn't, because they're...
giving something up, you know? It doesn't feel like you're giving something up if you're part of the discussion. And
so having the argument for carrying a gun is for self-defense, right? Well, that wouldn't be angry.
one of the arguments. No, it's not it shouldn't be. I mean, I don't think that we need to completely take away all gun rights, and I don't think most people do. That's the thing. I don't know where politicians are kind of getting this from. They try to drive this wedge in between us, but as people, let's come together, let's talk. A friend of ours on our Facebook page, we might have on next week, depending if he wants to, is an NRA member, and it's great to like engage. And as an NRA member, he commented right on the Facebook page that he's for sensible limits on guns, and NRA members should be, and NRA members should insist that the NRA advocate on behalf of its members for some of those limits, and to the extent the NRA maybe doesn't do that, then as a member, if you're a member, you should request and demand that they do, that they shouldn't be completely against any kind of limit.
Yeah, at least hear them out, because I don't think that these politicians that are proposing limits are trying to take away your guns.
No.
Which is what it, like you said, that's how
it ends up getting framed, because it's more dramatic. I don't know if it's the media, if it's news, if it's just the way our society is now set up with these echo chambers of social media, that we tend to think in black or white rather than just sitting down and having discussion with people around us and seeing even those that have views that aren't like us, we can find common ground.
And there's not a snowball effect. It's not that we're going to pass one gun restrictive legislation and then it's going to just keep getting worse and worse and worse, and by the
Is
end,
that the fear? It's like this slippery slope that if you pass one limit, that the next thing you know, all guns will be banned.
But that's the beauty.
Silly argument.
Yeah, because that's the beauty of America. We have these checks and balances where if Congress oversteps its bounds, there are two other branches that could be like, whoa, slow down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and also, I mean, we might start getting into topics for next week, but the Supreme Court has been clear on gun rights and has overturned restrictions that completely limit guns. So that's not going to happen, especially not with the court that we have now. But let's kind of end this on a good note today. I wanted to bring up something. I have a quote from a book that came out recently. Steve Pinker is the author, and he went through and looked at all of these different statistics, markers for society. And the heart of the book is really a set of graphs that shows all the ways society's really been improving over time. We tend to, hear about acts of terror and mass shootings and think, God, the world is getting so much more violent. But what he says, I'll just read the quote. It's contrary to the impression you might get from the newspapers that we're living in a time of epidemics and war and crime. The curves show that humanity has been getting better, that we're living longer, we are fighting fewer wars, and fewer people are being killed in the wars. Our rate of homicide is down, violence against women is down, more children are going to schools, girls included. More of the world is literate. We have more leisure time than our ancestors did. Diseases are being decimated, famines are becoming rarer, so virtually anything that you could measure that you'd want to call human well-being has improved over the last 2 centuries, but also over the last couple of decades. And he goes on to say, progress is not the same as magic. There will always be blips and setbacks and sometimes horrific lurches, like the Spanish flu pandemic, World War II, and the post-1960s crime boom. Progress takes place when the setbacks are fewer, less severe, or stop altogether. Clearly, we have to be mindful of the worst possible setback, namely nuclear war, which we probably will talk about that at some point too. And the risk of permanent reversals, such as worst-case climate change scenarios. Of course, life is bad for those people with the worst possible lives, and that will be true until the rates of war, crime, disease, and poverty are exactly zero. The point is there are far fewer people living in nightmares of war and disease. The book is called Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. And I believe he's a scientist.
We'll link.
Yeah, we'll link it. I should have had more information on his background. But I mean, the graphs that he has are very telling in that, we keep hearing more and more about these horrible things. And we can't take those for granted, like you said, but overall, we are making progress. So it's kind of good to hear that and to see it in black and white.
I don't like generalizations. I don't think that there's any one thing that applies to everybody. So saying, and plus the news does kind of depict this bad world.
Bleak.
Yeah.
Well, that's what gets attention, unfortunately. I mean, that's, it's harder to drive ratings with just kind of boring stories about how everything's going okay.
And I don't necessarily think that we handle the people where he talked about what did he say exactly?
The people with the worst possible lives.
Yeah. So I don't think that we necessarily handle them as, like, America's foreign policy doesn't necessarily handle that the best
Yeah, there's
way.
ways we can, there's totally ways. He's not saying everything's perfect. Like, we can improve until it goes to zero, until those rates of crime, disease, war go to zero, there's always room for improvement. But to look at history and say that things are getting worse, they're getting bleaker, it's just simply not true.
We actually spoke to somebody this morning who said those words, and Kelly pulls out this book and she's like, no.
Pretty much. I mean, from a yogic perspective, I think we should be optimistic about our future. And what I see is that people are becoming more in tune with themselves. There is a sort of enlightenment happening. We're seeing more community movements, farmers markets, things where people are working together. So shifts are happening. It's not all bleak, but we also need to work on these things that we can work on, and movements like the March for Our Lives is a good way to make change, as long as we remember to stay in that place of loving kindness while we're doing it.
I wonder if it's generational. Like, each generation goes through this process where they get enlightened, and then it starts over with the next generation, where they go through the same or a similar process, but in their own context.
Yeah.
So, like, my dad's context would be through the civil rights movement, whereas our context is through, like, nuclear war and mass shootings and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I wonder if each generation goes through its own process of enlightenment, but within its own context.
I'm sure you could see that and say that, yeah. And then on a larger scale, humanity continues to go through periods of enlightenment. And those periods of enlightenment are often preceded by periods of great darkness. Like if we look at the Renaissance.
Because it's a pendulum swing.
It is. So the Renaissance was preceded by the Dark Ages, and we see that over time. I mean, the world is set up for us to learn from it. It's set up to, we're programmed to grow.
Technically, we're just a star.
We're made of the same stuff as stars. But everything wants to grow towards the light. You see it with trees, with animals, with everything. We want to grow and better ourselves, whatever that may mean for you. That's kind of what we're programmed to do, not to remain stagnant. Like, we're here to change. Hopefully we can change for the better and help other people to change for the better as well.
So key points from this talk is that love is not the opposite of hate. Love is way too complex to have a pure opposite.
Well, it's at the heart of everything.
Mm-hmm. And what else did we talk about?
Well, we talked about the March for Our Lives and about, continuing this discussion next week.
Are you going to go to the March for Our Lives?
Yeah, I probably will, just because they're having one at Lake Eola, which is blocks from my house. So
yeah, so maybe you can get some footage or something.
I probably could.
That'd be cool, so we can see kind of what
That's in
it's
a couple
like.
weeks, but yeah, we'll totally do that. Well, let us know what you think, and be sure to subscribe. Hit that button and subscribe right there. And we will see you next time. I'm going to put the button right there.
I know, I like that. I was like, what is she pointing at?
Thank you for watching the Yoga Lawyer video.